You ever, excuse me, you ever just uttered the phrase or heard the phrase, I just can't do it anymore? You ever been to that point in life where you're at the end of your rope, you're just, you're holding on for dear life, and you just, I just need a break, I need a vacation, I don't have the strength to hold on, I just can't do it anymore. I don't know how many times I've had people come into my office and just say, Pastor, it's just, I'm going through this tough time. I'm going through this trial in life. I'm going through this time, and it's a different situation each time, and it's I just don't think I can make it. I just can't do it. What do I do? How can I make it? What do I do? There's been several times in my life as I look back at the different things that that we've been through, and there's definitely been moments where that's what it feels like. It's just like I can't do this. How can I keep going? What do I do? We're going to continue our series in Judges, the series that we started a few weeks ago, and the book of Judges is just I loved the book of Judges when I was younger, when I was in middle school and high school. I loved it because it had all these weird and interesting things that would happen. It was like battles and war and soldiers happening. There was people like putting tent pegs through people's heads, and it was weird and gross and nasty, and I was like, this is really cool. I loved it as a middle schooler. But as the older I get, I realize, I started reading through it, and I'm like, wow, this actually, we can learn so much. And it's so applicable to today's time, because in the time of Judges, and the history, the time of the Israelites, this was a time where they had no king. God set up the nation, and they had just entered the promised land, and God set this nation up, and he said, I want to be your Lord, I want to be your king, I want you to follow me. And he made it really easy on him. He said, these are the rules that I want you to do. And if you just follow these rules, everything will be fine. But if you don't, and you choose someone else to be your Lord, or you choose something else to be your God, then he says, then I will allow that to be your God, and you will see what happens in life. And so the book of Judges is just, there's a cycle over and over again. The Israelites realize that they need God, and so they cry out to him, and they begin to follow him, and he sends this judge, this person, this leader, to just help deliver them, and then there's years of peace. Sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 80, sometimes it's 40. There's years of peace, and then they get so comfortable in their life, things get going so well in life that instead of wanting the Lord and needing the Lord anymore, they turn away from him. They begin to follow false idols and false gods. They do what was right in their own eyes. That's what's the repetition over and over. They did what was right, what they wanted to do. And then God would allow them to see what happens when that happens. And there's a cycle. Then they would turn away from God. Then it would get so miserable that they would turn back. And God, in his loving and his grace and his mercy, would forgive. So we're going to pick up in Judges chapter 6, verse 1. Last week we looked at Deborah, the judge Deborah, and how God used Deborah in jail, and really how he used jail, this lady that just what she had in her hand. She was able to deliver the Israelites with some milk, a tent peg, and a hammer. And she said yes to God. Yes, I will do whatever you want. I will do it. I'll use what I have. And he delivered the Israelites. And there was 40 years of peace. And then, Judges chapter 6. It says, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites, because the power of Midian was so oppressive. The Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in the mountain clefts and caves and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, the Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped on the land. They ruined the crops all the way to Gaza, did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep, nor cattle, nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count the men and their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. So here we find that the Israelites, again, they do evil in the sight of the Lord, and God says, okay, you know what, if that's what you want to do, if you want to do what's right in your own eyes, if you want to do that, then go ahead. And he took his hand of protection off, and the Midianites, this was a nomad people. This was a nation that didn't have a king. They didn't have an army or whatever. They were just like, they compares it to a swarm of locusts. They came in, they would wipe everything out, and then they would leave and wait for the Israelites to plant more food. And they'd come in and they'd wipe out. The history of the Midianites, the Israelites actually conquered the Midianites like 250 years prior to this. In fact, they couldn't stand each other. The Midianites were seen, in the culture of that day, the Midianites were seen as people that were uncultivated, unintelligent. They were just this force of people that would just come in, do whatever they want. They would plunder the country. They would get the spoils. They were like band. They were like robbers. They're thieves. And that's what they were seen at. This whole nation, this whole clan of people were just seen of nothing but just thieves. And they would come in at harvest time, wipe everything out. They'd take all the cattle. They'd get all this food. They'd live. They'd have fun, and they'd wipe everything out, and then they would leave the Israelites with nothing. So the Israelites would have to scramble. They'd have to try to find food. They'd have to try to save food. They'd have to try to hide food, or they would starve. And then the next spring, they would plant, kind of like right now. See the farmers out in the field starting to plant. They would plant their food. They would, the crops would grow, and then right when it was about time to harvest, they'd come in again and take it all. All that hard work gone. For 7 years, it says they did this. They just would come in, they'd wipe it all out, and they would leave. The Israelites were getting desperate. In fact, it says this. It says in verse 6, Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. It got so bad, they were like, we are going to starve to death. We're dying right now. What do? We can't do anything. We have no hope left. And they remembered, wait a minute. There's God. Wait a minute. Maybe there is hope. Maybe there is something that can be done. And they cry out to the Lord. They cry out and they say, God, help us. God, we're sorry. So the angel of the Lord, they cry out to God. And when the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said this. Now we don't know who this prophet is. It doesn't tell us the prophet's name. But there's a prophet, a man who's speaking for the Lord. He says, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I snatched you from the power of Egypt, from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them from before you, and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord. I am Yahweh your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, whose land you live in. But you have not listened to me. They cry out to God again, this cycle. They're like, God, we're sorry, please help us. And God almost, if you read this, it almost sounds like he's this frustrated father, doesn't it? Like he's like, I did this, this, and this. I told you this. I provided for you this. I have rescued you over and over again. And you don't listen. I don't know if as a parent you've ever been to that moment of frustration. Especially when they're about this tall, that 3, 4, and 5-year-old stage, that preschool, oh my goodness. I don't know if yours did, but, mine were really good at pushing my buttons. And then, eventually you're just like, you don't listen. Like, if you would just listen, it would be okay. I hear God just going, looking at his children, his Israelites, going, just listen to me. And at this moment, I find it so amazing, and I know I say this just about every week when I'm going through Judges, but it just astounds me. God's forgiveness and his grace. Because you can hear the frustration of you don't listen. And it would be so easy just to be like, you know what, you don't listen, I'm done. I'm done with you. I'm going to go find someone else that listens. But God's love and grace and mercy and forgiveness is so amazing and so great that he says, you don't listen. But then he forgives and he provides a warrior. He forgives. He shows his grace. And this is what happens. It says, the Lord, but you have not listened to me. We pick up in verse 11. It says, the angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak of Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about threshing wheat. Now, when the grain was threshed at this time, it was thrown up in the air, and it was winnowed against the wind. And after it'd be tossed up, what would happen was the heavy stuff, the grain, would fall back down, and then the straw or the chaff would blow away. So what they would do is they'd get on top of a big hill. It was usually on a high place, generally on high grounds, usually a big flat area on high grounds, and they would take the wheat, or the grain, and they'd have big sheets, or they'd have different things, or even just buckets, and they would throw it up in the air as high as they can, and all the good stuff would fall down, the bad stuff would just blow away in the wind. And they would do this over and over until all they had left was the good grain. That's normally what would happen. However, we find Gideon. It says he was threshing wheat in a wine press. Now, a wine press is, they would dig a big, huge hole, and then they would dig another hole down in the ground. And they would put the grapes in the first hole, and they would stomp down the grapes, and the grapes the juice would flow down into the second hole. This is the big wine press. The thing about this is, though, you were in a pit. There was no wind. There was no easy way to separate the wheat and the chaff. It was just the wrong way. So here's Gideon, hiding in a hole, trying to throw up the grain to see if it would separate. But it's not going to separate. He's doing the best he can. He's doing it the hard way. It's almost like the hardest way you could do it, that's what he was doing. He was doing it the hard way because he was scared. Last year, I think it was last summer or so, we were taking out our fence. One of our big trees fell down on our fence, and we decided to take down the whole fence or whatever. And I had probably about, 15, 20 posts that were cemented in the ground. Well, I decided it was time to take out the posts, and so I got out my shovel, and I got out my big spade bar or whatever, and I started digging. I got my sledgehammer out, and I was pounding on the concrete. I was pulling up. I was doing everything I could to try to get these posts out of the ground. And it took me about an hour and 15 minutes to get one post out. And I was sweating. I was hurting. I was going, oh, this is going to be horrible. I even had a handheld jackhammer, that I plugged in and was trying to break apart. It was like impossible. It was the hardest thing I could do. And as I'm doing that, my neighbor beside me walks out. He goes, "You plan on taking all those out?" I'm like, "Yep, I can do it." I've got a couple days. I'll just, a little bit extra work, get the boys involved. We'll get all these out. And he laughed and he goes, you're doing it the hard way. So what's the only way I know how to do it? So I just bought a new tractor. I'll be back. He comes back with his brand new tractor, a big chain, wrapped it around the post, right out of the ground. It's like, that's the way to do it. It took him about a half hour to get all the posts out. The hard way versus, I guess, the right way. Gideon was doing it the hard way. He was doing it, it was almost impossible to get done. But he was scared. He was terrified. So the angel sits down beside him. He sees him doing this, and I just can imagine the angel just almost chuckling at himself, going, what are you doing? Come on, Gideon. So when the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said this. He said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Mighty warrior. The Lord is with you. But sir, Gideon replied, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our fathers told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and put us in the hands of Midian. The Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength that you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? But Lord, Gideon asked, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. I love this. God comes, or the angel comes, and he looks at Gideon and he says, mighty warrior. And I could see Gideon looking around going, wait, who are you calling mighty warrior? That's not my name. You got the wrong person. You got the wrong guy. My name, in fact, his name meant barley. He was like, I'm not mighty warrior, I'm barley. You ever been a parent that messed up your child's name? You call your child by the wrong name, and sometimes we call our, my parents used to do all the time, all of our names starts with A. Angie, Andrew, April, Anthony. And then my dad's name was Aaron. So when my mom would get mad, she would just start going through everyone's names. She would, Aaron, Angie, April, Andrew, whatever your name is, And then finally she would remember, Andrew David Bush, get over here now. She used all three names. Messing up your child's name, that's almost like, he's like, oh, wrong name. Who are you talking about, God? I'm not a mighty warrior. You got the wrong guy. Like I said, let me tell you why you got the wrong guy. First, my clan is the weakest clan out of everyone. We're like nobodies. Wrong clan, God. I think you meant to go down the road. And you got the wrong guy in the clan because I'm the weakest guy in my clan. And not only that, am I the youngest family and the weakest person, I'm in this pit hiding, trying to thresh my wheat because I'm scared. I am not mighty warrior. Wrong person, wrong wine press. Maybe go down the road, take a right. There's a really cool guy down there. Go talk to him. Maybe find someone named Samson. I'm sure he's probably, ready. I'm not a mighty warrior. Here's what's amazing. I see that, and he calls him mighty warrior. And he calls Gideon mighty warrior before Gideon was a mighty warrior. God sees who he has created us to be. He sees our potential. He sees so much more potential, and he sees so much more in us than we could ever realize. It's amazing. So many times we see ourselves as just this. I'm just a teenager. I'm just a kid. I'm just Drew. I'm just, I'm just barely, a parent. I'm just a factory worker. And we put I'm just this. God, you have the wrong person because I am nobody. And God sees our potential. He sees what he built you for, what he made you for, and he says, no. You are so much more than that. You're so much more than the labels that society puts on you. I see this all the time in youth. I love watching our youth as they begin to realize who they are. There's so many times where they're so afraid, or they see themselves as so much less, and it's like, you know what, there's so much potential in you. So what God is saying to each and every one of us, he says there's so much potential. Your potential is so much more than what you think. And you may not see it, and we may not see it, but God sees it. When God looks at you, he sees Superman when all we see is Clark Kent. Get that right. Or if you're a Marvel person, you know, he sees Spider-Man when we see Peter Parker. He sees the potential in each and every one of us. It's amazing. This is something that happens all throughout Scripture over and over and over again, and where God sees what you can do or what he has called you to do way before you do. It happens with David. David was just a little boy, and he was called to be king, and God saw that he could be a hero, that he could take on a giant, and he does. Everyone else saw a little boy, and he sees a hero. Happens with Moses. Moses was a murderer. Okay, Moses killed someone, and then he was afraid that he was going to get in trouble, so he runs away. He was a murderer. He was a deserter. He was someone who turned his back on God. And God doesn't see that. God sees this amazing leader who's going to lead his people. God didn't see a murderer and an orphan. He saw a leader. There's a man named in the New Testament named Saul. Saul was this religious zealot who did everything right. He was earning his way to heaven. He did everything right. In fact, he was even killing Christians. And God didn't see Saul. God saw the greatest missionary ever. He saw Paul and changed his life. God sees us. He knows who we really are. He knows what he created us for. He knows what he created you for. And he is calling you. He's calling me. He's calling each and every one of us. But here's the thing. He does not force us to say yes. He is saying, this is the potential that I have for you. This is my calling for you. You are a mighty warrior. I want you to live up to that. I want you to be the mighty warrior. But I'm not going to force it. Like last week, we said, we just need to say yes. That's the easiest thing to do, is just say yes to God. Yes, God, do whatever you want. And then enjoy the amazing ride that he has for us. And when we do, when we say yes, he will begin to show his power and his will in you. Because God has so much planned for your life. There's so much potential for you. I didn't ask permission. I don't know if I should do this. I'm sorry if I embarrassed someone in here, okay? When I was preparing this, I thought of two different people, actually, that I could use as an illustration of just God, just them saying yes and God just doing amazing things. So I'm sorry if I embarrass you. But 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, there was this kind of redheaded, strawberry blonde teenager that walked into the sanctuary. A friend of Kale's. That's how I met him. Said, hi, how you doing? Good. You know, my name's Andrew. I'm like, hey, my name's Andrew too. That's awesome. Just a random teenager that God brought in. And God saw potential in him. And now he leads worship every Sunday morning. Because he said yes. God sees our potential. You know, it was about 4 years ago too, 3 or 4 years ago, we were trying to figure out this new ministry called LifeWise. LifeWise Academy. It's an amazing thing, and you know what? We were looking for, well, I mean, there's two. We were looking for a teacher, and we were looking for a director. And so God brought someone in our sanctuary, God brought someone to our church named Jana Lee, and she said, yes, I'll be the teacher. That's an amazing story if you want to hear that one. And he said, we need a director, and there was this one lady who sits in the way back of the sanctuary every Sunday named Pat. who I'm sure she was like, you know what, I'm ready to retire. And God said, I see something in you, Pat. I want you to direct LifeWise. She said, yes. God is doing amazing things. God will do amazing things when we just say yes and let the potential that he has show in us. God sees it. God knows it. And he calls us. We just need to allow God to do it in our life. Listen, he is calling you. He is saying, mighty warrior, I need you. He is saying, my child, I need you. My child, I've got great plans for you. And I'll tell you what, it begins with taking that first step of following him. When he cries out and he says, my child, it begins with following him. It begins with saying, yes, God, I want you to be my Savior. I want you to be my Lord. Please heal my heart. Please forgive me. Complete that hole that's in my life. I know there's something missing in my life, and God, it's you. So God, please come and fill that hole. Make me whole again. It starts by saying yes and following God first. And then he calls you and says, my child, mighty warrior. So God calls Gideon. He says, mighty warrior. I've got some plans for you. Mighty warrior. Go with the strength and save Israel. Mighty warrior. This is something amazing. And Gideon's question, I love this. In fact, if you're an underliner, underline this in verse 15. He says, but Lord, how can I save Israel? Gideon's question right here is amazing. He says, but God, how can I do this? I can't do this. Gideon was honest with God, and he looked and he said, you know what? I don't have the strength. God, I do not have the strength to do this. God, I cannot do this. Guess what? You said go with the strength that you have. God's like, go in the strength that you have. And Gideon's like, guess what, God? I have none. I have no strength. I've been starving for 7 years, God. I have been going through this hard time for 7 years. I have no strength left. In fact, there's so little strength that I'm hiding in a wine press trying to do an impossible job. God, I can't do this. What am I supposed to do? How can I? Because I can't. Have you been there before? I've tried. I've failed. I've tried. I've failed. I've done it over and over again. I have been through this for so long. It's been this many years. God, I have no strength left. God, how can I forgive this person? God, I can't forgive this person. I don't have the strength to forgive this person because they did this, and this. God, I can't. God, I can't stop this addiction because I've been living this addiction for so long in my life that I can't even envision my life without this. I can't. I've tried. I failed. I can't. I've tried. I failed over and over. God, I can't love this person. I don't have the strength to love this person. I can't do it anymore. How can I do this? The Lord's answer is this. I will be with you. I'm going to pause right there, period. I will be with you. God says, I know you can't. You can't, but I can. There's this saying that goes around that says God will never give you more than you can't handle. It's not true. I'm sorry. God will allow more than you can handle, but he will never allow more than he can handle. There will be times in life where you say, I can't, I don't have the strength, I can't handle this. And God says, yes, I know you can't, but I can. Just come to me, rely on me, come to me, say yes to me, and I can handle it. And I will be with you. Hebrews 13 says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I will not leave you alone in this time. I will be with you, and I can handle it. See, this thing, God's presence, God's strength, God's peace is all we need. His guidance. The Spirit is what we need. In fact, it's so amazing. The rest of this, he says, I will be with you. And this is what it's going to be like. He's like, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one person. He goes from fighting against grasshoppers and hordes of people that come in that you can't even count, that wipes everything out, this huge problem, to just, you know what, when I'm with you and you rely on me, it's like fighting one person. That's how great God's presence is. He's like, you are not alone in this. You may feel alone. You may say, I'm in this by myself. It's just me. But listen, we are not alone. You are never in it by yourself. God is there. God is there, and he is waiting for you to rely on him. He's right there. But how many times do we try to do it on our own? How many times do we try to do it on our own strength? We try to say, you know what, maybe I can. I think this has probably got to be one of the main problems of I don't know if the main problem, but it's got to be one of the problems of Christianity today is we have become self-reliant Christians. It's this. It's basically, you know what, I believe in Jesus, but I can do everything on my own. I'll believe, but you know what, I don't need God. Because I can fix it. In fact, for a while it was, you know what, I need to fix myself before I can even believe in God. I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to fix it myself. And when I make a mistake, then I have to stand alone and fix my mistake. I have to make it better for myself. I have to make up for what I have done. And I have to do it on my own strength. It's all about me and what I do. Here's the problem is when we try to atone for our own sins and our own mistakes, when we try to make it better by doing something ourselves, we cheapen the grace of God. When we try to do it on our own, then when we say that Jesus' sacrifice wasn't good enough, so I need to do something to make it better. We tell God, you know what, your presence isn't good enough. I have to do it on my own. Here's the problem is when we say I have to do it on my own, it leads to a point where we're like, you know what, I've messed up so much I can't do it anymore. When we keep doing it on our own, it leads us to that point where like I'm at the end of my rope, I'm holding on, and I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm done. I'm about to let go. I can't do it anymore. And then we have a choice. When we get to the I can't do it, we have a choice. We can turn to God, who can, or we can quit, or we can turn to something else that can't. It's our choice. Do we turn to God who can or something else that can't? In recovery, in Celebrate Recovery, that goes through a 12-step process of healing and recovering. And the step one is this. It's I'm going to summarize it really quickly. Step one is this: I can't. I need help. It's that point where you say, I can't do it anymore. I need help. I've tried over and over, and I can't do it. I've made this mess. Step two is, but God can. There is someone that can, and it's God. And step three is, I need to turn my life over to him. That's basically what this is saying. That's basically what Gideon is, you know what? I can't do it, but God says, I can. So just turn your life over to me. When we go through those times of trials, those tough times, and we say, I can't do it anymore, we need to cry out to God. Cry out to God and just turn to him and say, God, I need your presence. God, I need your strength. You want to know why I need your strength, God? Because you will take a horde, you will take grasshoppers, you will take countless problems, and you will make it to one man. You will make the unsurmountable problems, and you will turn them into small, tiny, insignificant things that I can make it through with your presence. We don't have time today to actually finish the rest of Gideon. I'm going to ask Andrew actually to come forward, and we're going to get ready to close. We'll probably finish Gideon next week, possibly. But there's a verse that I want to show you really quickly. And it's this, in verse 34. I can't give you everything that's happened up until this point, but this is so important. It says in verse 34, it says, "Then the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power." God said, "Gideon, I know you can't, but I can." And Gideon relied on God, and God gave him the power to become a mighty warrior. God's Spirit, his strength, saves the Israelites through Gideon, because Gideon was willing to say, God, if you're going to call me a mighty warrior, you're going to have to do something in me. And God does. So this morning, as we conclude, the question I want to ask you is this: what are you struggling through today? What are you struggling through right now? What are you struggling through today where you says, I can't? But God says, I can. Or what crazy call is God placing on your life? What is he saying that you're just afraid to say yes to? What is God saying? This is what I want you to do, and you're so afraid to say yes to it. Maybe this morning it's time to say yes. Yes, God, whatever potential you see in me, whatever you're calling me to do, yes, and allow his presence and his strength to show up in your life. Let's stand. And this morning, my challenge, just say yes. Allow God to pour into your life and make you whole. Let's finish worshiping him.